It's always refreshing. I think this is an interesting community in kind of that entrepreneurial small business world where when you meet someone you can relate to, you really do kind of feel that connection, even if it's totally different industries.
It all comes back to mindset, right? And like you said, it doesn't matter the profession, it doesn't matter the industry. It's how you treat people, right? And so many things that go into a business. Welcome back to the Reginald Report. We have an amazing individual today, Dan London, and welcome to the podcast. I'm excited about this podcast because I get to bring on someone that is a young professional that has really worked up the ranks within a business, became an entrepreneur, and has overcome a lot of different diversity already at such a young age. So I'm excited to kind of talk about that journey, inspire some other people that maybe are in a point of struggle. And gives them some, advice and words of wisdom. So welcome to the podcast, Dan.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andrew. First and foremost, just want to say I appreciate you having me on the show. When we met a couple weeks ago, it was funny. I drove home and realized that I think we had lunch for maybe 45 minutes to an hour. And I was like, we probably could have talked for 4 or 5 hours consecutively.
100%. It was flowing, and it was like, I got a meeting, you got a meeting. It was like, oh, why do we got to cut this off, right?
It's always refreshing. I think this is an interesting community in kind of that entrepreneurial small business world where when you meet someone you can relate to, you really do kind of feel that connection, even if it's totally different industries.
100%.
And one of the things I think we connected on was just the commonalities that exist regardless of what you do, who you do it with, of what are those challenges, what are the keys to kind of overcome.
It all comes back to mindset, right? And like you said, it doesn't matter the profession, it doesn't matter the industry. It's how you treat people, right? And so many things that go into a business. So, Dan, where were you born and raised? A little context for you.
Yeah, so I'm one of the rare ones that was born and raised in Naples, Florida. And
105.
Yeah. I tell clients, they're like, where are you from, Dan? And I say, Naples, Florida. And they're like, no, before you moved to Naples. I'm like, no, I was born in Naples. And they're like, wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So I was born and raised here in Naples, Florida. My dad's from a small town in Montana. Mom's from a small coal town in West Virginia. And they both wound up here in the 70s and decided that it was better to be here than in the snow.
I don't blame them, But Dan, tell me a little bit about your current business. Like, where are you at today? I know there was a journey leading up to it, but where are you currently at today?
Yeah, there was definitely a journey. And I think the easiest way to describe myself is I'm an entrepreneur and a financier. And what that boils down to in kind of bar conversation, I just tell people I help smart people make good decisions with their money and their businesses. So my core business is I'm a senior vice president at Capital Wealth Advisors, which is a ultra high net worth investment advisory firm. So I have a book of private clients there, primarily entrepreneurs and business owners, where I help them look at their financial lives, right? Real estate, businesses, liquid investments, where they want to go, and build custom investment solutions for them. So that's the core business. And from there, the kind of next focus of my time is in London Executive Suites, which is really a hybrid kind of workspace solution for small businesses and entrepreneurs. And the third business is London Life Consulting, which is really a business consulting and performance coaching. So I work with 2 kinds of entrepreneurs typically, and that's 0 to 1, what I call whiteboard warriors with a lot of love behind it of, hey, we've got an idea and how do we make this real?
Yeah.
Or the flip side is succession planning, mature businesses that say, I've built this for X amount of years. I don't know what the future looks like. Is that, a transaction? Is it a sale to management? So I've kind of had that iteration happen through my journey like you talked about. So that's essentially what I do now.
So Dan, your age is
26.
26. All right. It's the listeners. Obviously, that's a lot, right? You've done a lot in 26 years. So, what was your first job?
So my first job was in the family business. So my dad was a small business owner, and not in the ultra glamorous way. We had a business that, went through 2008, which was a hard time for most small businesses. Yeah. So at an early age, I was sweeping hangar floors and inventorying maintenance parts on the aircraft. So my first job was really the family business.
So you're a janitor.
Yeah, it was whatever needed to be done, got done.
Errand boy, janitor, whatever, right?
But it was, I think for where I am today, it was a great first job in the sense of it was my family. So there was a direct kind of loyalty without feeling like, oh, I'm working for a boss or the man. And I really got to see a lot about the entrepreneurial journey and path firsthand, in the sense of, hey, it's great. Dad's at a lot of the hockey games. It's bad because, hey, this is really tough.
Yeah. Ups and downs you got to experience at an early age.
For sure.
So how's that path look? Like, tell me a little bit about that. So, obviously you went from, in a sense, sweeping the hangar floor to now running multiple businesses,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's it's a long path that I'll condense down for the spark notes, but really it did start in that family business kind of model. I really admired that, and I started my next business in high school, and that was a kind of half-baked attempt, but it was an attempt, and that gave me a little bit of excitement around it. So I pursued a degree from Florida State University, primarily because at the time they'd founded the Jim Moran College of Entrepreneurship, which was dedicated to being its own college for commercial entrepreneurship. So kind of back to those early family business days, I was like, well, I really like the idea of being able to work for myself, and this seems like a good program to do it in. So I attended Florida State University. I was accepted into their inaugural class, and I think what I described to you and I described to people is it became a crash course MBA, in the sense of all of the professors had owned and sold businesses or were still owning and operating their own companies. So in a very short period, the program did an exceptional job of teaching you business from reality and practicality, not from a textbook.
Which I think is missed in so much of the academics nowadays. And if that's collegiate or whatever it is, we need to get back to trade style teaching, right? And that through experience or whatever. So
yeah, I mean, I think about you, right, is how many times have you used Pythagorean theorem and algebra in starting your businesses?
Yeah.
Never.
Tons every day,
But if someone had taught you a basic tax class or business finance, that would have been pretty good.
A tax class would save so many people millions and millions of dollars, right? Because it's just unreal. But they don't want to teach you that, right?
Yeah.
That's where they make their money.
Right.
And the collegiate programs, I mean, the amount of people that are invested in colleges, well, yeah, why not? That's where all the money's made.
And you and I talked about this. I think there's something to be said about the School of Hard Knocks. I'm a proponent of higher education. It's a great thing for me. It's a great thing for most people. But there are some lessons that are best learned kind of the hard way through experience. So I think the program did a nice job of that. It also really encouraged the students to start their own businesses. So awesome. You had to register an LLC, you had to get a business bank account, you had to have an idea, pitch it, and start it. So I really got my start in the entrepreneurial world there through what was called the DOMI station at the time. It was a small business incubator. And I took my little business and I started hanging out there and asking these guys, hey, what are you doing? What works for you? What doesn't? And I ultimately joined a couple of pretty fast growing startups. And by my junior year, I was lucky enough to join a team called Top Tier Entertainment that was really doing kind of marketing and event planning based in Tallahassee, all grassroots, but also early into social media marketing.
Yeah.
And it was a rocket ship.
Yeah.
And by my junior year, we had the 3 largest venues under contract in the city. We had a huge payroll, huge team. I was running the Tallahassee operations as the partners kind of expanded into other markets. So at the time, I felt like I'd really learned a lot kind of the hard way.
Right.
And I went to the professor that I was closest with at the time and said, hey, with all due respect, I don't have time for the 8-week summer internship, which is required because I'm running a business. And he kind of laughed and said, I figured you might say something like that. And he cut me a deal and said that he would cut it to 6 weeks so I could kind of get some temporary coverage, leave the business, check the box, and come back. And that was ultimately one of the best things that happened to me because I became a summer intern for Capital Wealth Advisors, which is where I really launched my wealth management practice down the road. And that kind of exposed me to, my passion for the markets, for businesses, and the people behind them.
Now, you say you don't have enough time. That's an excuse everyone uses. My assumption is during those times, like, they weren't 8-hour work days, were they?
No, and I think you and I have connected on this of there's a glorified entrepreneurial world where people see the benefits, right?
Right.
And if you do get there, they see that. And then there's the underbelly of what it takes to get there. And you hit the nail on the head. I didn't have a normal life of a college student that was Monday through Friday classes. You go out, you work a couple shifts. At the time I was working probably 60 hours a week minimum. And these were night shifts. So I would go to class from 7 to 3. I had registered student organizations I oversaw, so I'd do those meetings in the afternoon, and then from 6 to 3 a.m., I had a business to run. So yeah, after 3 years, right, like you said, the amount of free time just didn't exist.
Right. And I think when you look at society, right, and you look at something, let's say like you open anything, a social media platform, YouTube, whatever, it's a huge push in entrepreneurship, which is amazing, right? It's so great in so many ways, and I wish that for everyone. I really do. But what they don't show you is all the grit that it takes to get to there. They give you the basic outlines, but they don't really put in perspective on what it takes to achieve it. And so I think there's this big thing about, hey, if you're working for someone else, you should leave and go start your own venture, and in some cases, in some situations, I agree with that. In a lot of the cases, though, people don't have the infrastructure. You learned a lot of experience from someone else. You learned a lot of knowledge through failure on someone else's expense. If someone leaves a job that's paying them and supporting their family, and they go off and be an entrepreneur, and then they fail, because most entrepreneurs fail, right? A few times, a lot of times, right?
Most
before
of the
they
time.
Succeed. Now they're not only jeopardizing themselves, they're jeopardizing their family too. And so I think it's not that I don't want them to become an entrepreneur. I just wish that society, and I wish that there was not as many fake entrepreneur, I guess, coaches is what I think the best way to say it. I wish it was more real and more authentic. Like in your program, what you mentioned it, but what's so cool is that all the professors, have either, started companies, bought, sold companies, still operating companies, different things. Those are resources. A YouTube video, an Instagram reel, different things like that. Okay. What are you going to DM them with all your questions as you're going through, right? And so it's like, you need to have the resources for the guidance, or you need to learn it from someone else.
I couldn't agree more. And I think this is a topic that you and I really connected on. And, to your point, I see such a polarity dilemma here, because on one side of the spectrum, you have this rampant, what I call instapreneur culture.
I like that. Let's trademark that.
It's like that, it's through Instagram. You're showing the highlight reel, right? All the good parts. And we're all somewhat guilty of that.
Of course.
Myself included. I don't put the hard days and the bad stuff out there for everyone to see, because, that's my business.
Yeah. Do you post when you've had a cup of coffee at 10 p.m. or it's 2 a.m. and you're barely struggling to stay, awake, and you're finishing that last, presentation for the client? No, you're not going to post about that, right? Like, some people do, but like most people don't, right? That's not the glam, right? And oh my gosh. And it's funny because it all goes back to like, everyone always complained that like so-and-so was, the girls were looking at these models on front pages of whatever, right? Magazines. And they're like, they're shaming us and everything like that. Well, that same thing happened with Instagram. Same thing happened with any platform, right? It's the highlights, the best of the best. It's whatever they own, all that kind of stuff. And there's so much behind, and there's so much struggle, and there's so much probably unhappy that's happening. So we're all seeing the good, and there needs to be more people showing everything, right? The good, bad, and ugly.
And I think that's why I was excited to come on today and kind of work with you on this, is because I think the obligation is to recognize that, hey, this is a great tool, and entrepreneurship, right, is the backbone that's built this country. It is the American dream. It is an incredible path to autonomy, financial freedom, ability to make good impacts. So for us to be in a day and age where someone like you, right, that's done it, is tried and true, and, has good ethics and good experience to be able to preach from, you should be using this platform to reach people. Because there's so many people that they're just as smart and hardworking as I am, as you are, but maybe didn't have the same set of circumstances. So what I think about a lot is, how do you toe a line thoughtfully to be able to spread this word, right? Educate people appropriately, without making it just the highlight reel of here's the private jet trip and here's the success. But, I've talked to friends about this, and, I go through phases with social media where I get so busy, I'm like, it's gone, I can't check it, I don't know what's going on. And then I go through phases where I come back to what you and I have connected on, which is I've gained a lot of resources through, those platforms and through self-development. So I'm like, well, I should probably be present.
Yeah.
So I guess the way I've made my peace with it is to try and show both sides of like, yeah, I will post like that 4:30 in the morning, like, yeah, this one hurts, right? And like, this is the kind of behind the scenes of it's not fun.
Right.
And like, I did not want to wake up at 4:30 this morning and go to the gym and shower and prep for, 7 meetings in a row. But if I want to have all the benefits, which we're all kind of striving for, you got to do that. So kudos to you, right? Yeah. It is a discipline thing. And, one of the things I always tell my team is that discipline is a muscle. It's not a light switch. So you have to train it. Right. The more you train it, the easier it is to pick up that heavy object, to carry it across the finish line. But this mentality of today I'm motivated, right, and I'm just going to flip the discipline switch on, or, oh, my opportunity's here, now it's time to get disciplined, that will not work.
No, agreed. Discipline, it's a dangerous and amazing concept all in one, right? Like, because you can get super lazy and have no discipline. You can get too disciplined almost in some ways, and you almost, it could be a negative, right? But at the end of the day, discipline is usually always a positive. And I experienced it firsthand. I did the 75 hard, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, that's so much workout, so much, it's such a fitness thing, whatnot. And I did lose some weight because I didn't have discipline before, so I was eating food, whatever, right? And so I did lose some weight, but people were like, way to go on your diet. And just every single time they said, I'm like, it's not a diet. Like, it's not, there's a diet component of it, because doing a diet is difficult. So it takes discipline, right? Like, and then they're like, oh, it's a fitness thing or some workout program. Like, it's not. There is workout part, like there's a workout like aspect to it. But what's hard? Getting up, going to the gym every day, being consistent. That's discipline, right? The biggest takeaway I got from it was just the discipline of it, because the concept, without going too into 75 hard, is you have to do about 6 things, which is not incredibly hard. But you have to do 6 things, including workout, different things like that, drinking a gallon of water and stuff. But which all is going to help you and improve you and help your clarity and everything. But if you miss one of the things, it doesn't matter if it's the most simple thing or the toughest thing. If you miss one on one day, it doesn't matter which day you're on, you start over, back to 1. And you have to get all the way to day 75 of never missing anything. And that just shows the discipline, and it's one of those things is I wish, and maybe we should come up with this, Dan. We should come up with a 75 hard for business.
I love it. And
you know what I mean? Like, think about it. Like, if it was 75
same
days,
principles, right? Of just, here's the key focuses. You have to hit this, and not just once, but consistently.
Yeah.
Because that is the key, right? Is not just excelling in one area, occasionally, but it's finding these are the core disciplines that are going to require me to succeed, and I got to hit them every day.
Every day. Every day. Do not miss a day.
Yep. You don't want to that day, tough.
Doesn't matter.
You feel sick, whatever it is. Sorry.
Yep, exactly. And the thing is, it's like you'll make an excuse for yourself, and it does absolutely nothing, right? Yeah. Like excuses only please the people that make them, right? They do not ever please anyone else. It's just internal, right? And so if you can remove that, you have no excuses. You have no reasons why not to do it.
Totally agree. And I think this concept of discipline, and it's something that you have to have, right? Is you don't get to this point in kind of that entrepreneurial journey without it. And to your point, right, it's not as much about the working out. It really is back to that discipline. And if I've learned anything, especially I think as I kind of reflect introspectively on, it's been a fun ride, it's been a wild ride, and how did I get here? It really comes back to kind of that self-development. I'm a total geek on psychology, biology, how our minds work. And there's a great speaker, Jim Rohn, who I'm sure you're familiar with, back in the 70s, he said that if you spend time working on your job, you'll do well. If you spend time working on yourself, you'll have fortunes. And the whole philosophy, right, is you don't just work on the task at hand, the business at hand, but you're working on you, right? And it's kind of that idea of who do I want to be through this process? There's another great quote. I'm a total quote junkie as well.
Love it.
There's just so much wisdom in them, right? Like these little short, succinct statements from smart people.
And applied in a lot of different ways.
Right. So, I think you look at kind of that logic, right? And one of my favorite ones is there's profit in all labor. And that actually comes from the Bible. But the point of that saying is that in every part of the process, right, in the labor, it doesn't always feel like it.
Right.
But there's profit in that journey because you're getting more disciplined, more patient, more open-minded. So through all these kind of key components of discipline, I think what I've found is being committed to working on yourself, to becoming that best version of yourself, which encompasses health, physically, mentally, your relationships, your temperament. If you can focus on those things, you can really separate yourself. And that's a concept I mentioned to you that I kind of call EQ over IQ. Mm-hmm. So I talk a lot with my teams about emotional intelligence over just kind of true intellectual horsepower. You typically need both, right? If you're going to be a subject matter expert, you have to have the IQ and the horsepower to back it up. But I tell young people all the time, right? I came from what I love and is a great university, but it's not a traditional high finance placement school. And I have young people from the college reach out to me and say, how did you get into high finance from a state university without an MBA? And the first thing I tell them is it's EQ over IQ. And what that boils down to, right, is it's your social skills, your emotional intelligence, your ability to have kind of the soft skills of, I don't have to be the hardest or I don't have to be the smartest working in the room, but I'm probably going to be the hardest working, and I'm going to go the extra mile. I'm going to listen more than I talk. So
Read
I think that's
everything like that.
Yeah. And to your experience, right, you've had multiple iterations, right? Your journey has not been point A to point B. So how many times, right, have you had to evolve and be a chameleon in a room where you're new there and maybe you were underqualified or age was an issue? Maybe talk about that, right? Because you and I have related when Andrew and I first got lunch, one of the things we talked about was Andrew was a high performer in a handful of companies at a young age where your peer group or the people that you're actually overseeing that are answering to you are older than you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And one more comment on the EQ over IQ thing too is like, if you're in that situation that you feel that you have to be the smartest, step back for a second and realize, some of the most successful people in this world, were, first of all, uneducated, different things like that. I'm not saying they were dumb. They were very smart, but it goes back to the EQ. And if you don't know something, well, guess what? There's someone out there that does, right? Like Henry Ford, right? His famous line or something like that. He got called out and was like, you don't even know, blah, blah, blah. It was about like some lawsuit. He's like, you're right, but I have a switchboard here and I got access to 6 attorneys on any second, So he's like, I have the master of the minds everywhere around me. So I am, right? But emotionally, right? EQ, he could go and he could be in any room. He could talk to anyone. And he could, get the sales and he could read the audience or his consumers, whatever it might be, right? So I think it goes back to showing like, you have to have enough, right? You said you have to have some IQ, but you could always bring on someone smarter or help out or sub it out in a sense. Yeah, the age has been a fun one, right? Like I think we both rock some beards, right? Because it helps us a little bit. But I remember specifically for me with my past experience in aviation, I remember I was sitting in Afghanistan and, in the contractor world, the normal progression, you'd go to the military, you get out of the military, you don't know what to do, so you go into contract. You make some more money, you're not enlisted at that point, you have a lot of experience anyways, it's a great, you already have your clearance. So the guys and gals that I was working with, majority, when I was doing that work, were people that have already served 10, 15, 20 years. And so they are much older than I am, and I'm in my mid-20s. Now, I had a bachelor's degree in aeronautics, emphasis in all the drones and different things. So, in the sense, I was kind of the subject matter expert, but my age was very low. I remember specifically, like, they looked at me like I was the dumbest person ever. And, it's one of those things that it does take time, and it takes time to build credibility. And you have to have that EQ. You can't fight back at that time. I remember specifically there was a scenario, and I tried, a little bit. I gave a little nugget, and they shut that down, right? And that's okay. But when we got in a situation where it was a lot more critical, and they put their egos aside because we had an emergency in one of the aircrafts, I gave my opinion, and I pushed them with my experience to make a certain decision, and it worked. After that, it was like a light switch, right?
And question for you in that process, right, is early on, right? So you're the subject matter expert. You've been trained. You know it. You get it. But, right, you're in those early stages of still learning, improving yourself. Was there a kind of clearly defined turning point where you went from feeling like I have to convince everyone and kind of myself to like, no, now I'm not convincing myself. I'm confident in myself and I'm convicted. And now I just have to get everyone else to get on board?
For sure, there's a transition. When you instruct someone is when you really learn, right? And I say that because it's like I went through training. I got all my ratings. I was at that point, I was an instructor pilot, okay? But I wasn't instructing yet. And so in a sense, I was, the farthest you could go. But I didn't know anything in the grand scheme of things. Obviously I knew enough. But like when you start teaching someone, that's when you learn, right? And that's where internally I went from I know my stuff, right? And that's where that switch happened. But before that, I did have to tell myself. I had to convince myself and everyone else. But after that, it was like, boom, like I know my stuff. It's just a matter of teaching you. It's a matter of convincing you. It's a matter of whatever, right? It depends on the situation. But it does take a little bit of time.
Yeah. So I know you're a follower of him too, but Alex Hormozy has a great quote, and this isn't direct, but basically what he talks about is that. He says in the early stages, right, you're convincing yourself just as much as everyone else that you're capable and they should, trust you and work with you. And then at some point that shifts to you have just a undeniable stack of proof, right? He says, I am who I say I am, right? And here's the years of doing it. But I think for the young people, right, like we've talked about, is there is going to be a time early on where you have to bet on yourself, and you have to be willing to say, I don't have the gray hair, right? I don't have the 25 years of experience to fall back on. So right now I have to bet on me. And I always tell people that confidence is very palatable, and people can feel it and they want to feel it, right? So I think early on for me, similar to you, right, the world I was in kind of the high finance, I was blessed to have, the CEO of Capital Wealth Advisors and Bill Beynon brought me in as his apprentice, and I spent 3 years really just kind of running on his hip and learning from him at the highest level of really complex estate planning, business transactions, liquidity analysis. And one of the things I'll be forever grateful to him for was he would force me to think, right, to act, to speak. I wasn't there just to be a wallflower. And he kind of encouraged that, like, I don't care about your age. I don't care about your experience. You're going to learn this by doing, kind of like you said, through instructing. And there's so many struggles as, whether you're 40 and you start your business or 50 or you're 20, right? Being an early stage entrepreneur is tough. And I think especially as a young person, and what I found was I have 2 ears and one mouth for a reason. So in most initial meetings, I listen more than I talk. I don't know everything, so I'm not going to try and tell a 65-year-old successful entrepreneur that just sold his business for $100 million that I know it all and I'm the guy and don't worry, I got this.
Right.
He's not going to buy that.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I got the young man, I have socks older than you. You're not managing my money.
Right.
And I come back to that, right, what I quickly realized was I wasn't going to win business by trying to convince them otherwise. I was going to win business by being really honest, to your point of, hey, if I don't know an answer and I don't have that experience, guess what? My research team that comes from the institutional world and has done this for 30 years, they've got that experience.
Right.
I think just being really transparent with people about, hey, if I don't know something, I'm not going to tell you that I do. I'll be honest with you, but I'm going to go find that answer and I'm going to find it fast. And I think innately, right, you probably experienced this, is people have an aversion to working with young people originally, but once you become qualified and you prove yourself and that trust is there, I've been able to win a ton of business just based on the fact that I'm hungry, I'm young, I'm not playing golf 5 days a week like their 65-year-old advisor or consultant. And there's something kind of really contagious when you find that rare person that, you and I've talked about this, in today's day and age, if you're sub 30 and you have basic work ethic and some good discipline and habits, you are going to crush competition, because
It's really an advantage.
it is an advantage.
And not only because, first of all, like, you are going to crush the other people around you. I think what people forget is that there is a tipping point, and you hinted at that right there, is that you hinted at, you're not going to win by overpowering them. You're not by convincing them, right? You're going to outwork them, different things like that. And all that leads to most of the people. And first of all, I just want to say, if you're in Naples specifically, right, they are extremely successful individuals that have gone through the ringer so many more times that you have, right? And so, first of all, don't try to outsmart them. No. Don't try to bid them, do something, pull one over on them. It's going to backfire.
Not a good approach.
But the second thing is, like, these are successful, usually very successful individuals that were in your shoes at one point, right? So if you are a young, hungry entrepreneur, or young, hungry, just in general, someone that wants to earn more business, right? You could be working for another business. It doesn't matter. You could be sales, different things like that. You could be roofer, whatever. If you're out there hungry, honest, and you're true to them, and you're like, hey, I want to help you, blah, 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 it's an advantage. They want to help the younger generation because they were in that shoes at some point, right? They were in your shoes. So I think people don't realize that, like, if you can get past that and you can believe in yourself, and you're at that point where you know your stuff, you know your knowledge to a pretty high degree, and you're still willing to learn, if you show all that and present those cards to someone that's very successful, chances are you're going to have the advantage over even someone that's 50 and been doing it for 30 years.
I couldn't agree more, and I think you just gave some really good wisdom, not as a direct point, but kind of just as a side point, that one of the great things that's been additive to my life, and I'm curious, if you feel the same, is that mentorship.
100%.
And early on, I really found, right, I don't know everything. And frankly, in all the business ventures I've been involved in, my success has come from not being the smartest person in the room, but leveraging the EQ and that work ethic and discipline, right? But then surrounding myself with the smartest people, and then not being afraid to bother the hell out of them and say, I'm going to ask you questions. I want to know, what did you do in this situation? Why did you do it? What are your regrets? What are your wins? And I think that if you seek that out and you find genuine sources of it that really care about you, to your point, right, they remember, like, yeah, I kind of remember being at that point in my journey. And then when they see someone they can relate to, they're going to be inclined to help you. And
it's rewarding to them.
It is. You and I, right? It's like, when you see someone that you can relate to, you just have that, like, pull at your heartstring because you remember the people that helped you.
Yeah. I remember I go back to aviation for a second. I remember specifically looking over, no one in the right seat. I was on my first solo in the traffic pattern, right? I'm in an airplane, 500 feet above the ground by myself. I'm a student pilot. That feeling was surreal, right? And so then as an instructor, to get someone to that level and them do it, oh my gosh, it was just like, it pulled at you. I mean, that's what was rewarding. And so it goes back to, it could be in a business, it could be in life, it could be in, a relationship, it could be in whatever, right? People do want to help, right? And especially if they've achieved that, it brings them back, it brings them back to memory lane.
Absolutely. I think you touched on one other thing that you and I had connected on, and what you were saying a few minutes ago, that, even if you're not an entrepreneur, right? So really important distinction here is a lot of what we've talked about and what you'll hear from Andrew's content is not just applicable if you're an entrepreneur. I am a believer that in some way, shape, or form, almost everyone is, right? Kind of back to the brand is you, whether you're representing a bigger firm and you're part of the sales team, you're part of the marketing, or you are your own independent contractor, or the people that one day they want to be entrepreneurs, but they're taking stepping stones to get there, which is, by the way, pretty common, right? Very few people just start it and boom, it's theirs and it works. So I encourage,
very, very uncommon.
like never.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry to break it to you.
But, I encourage people to think about that. I'm like, regardless of the definition, right, you should have a very proud feeling of this is my brand and this is me, right? Mm-hmm. So regardless of the business card, the uniform, or the title, you know, I've always said that to employees and business partners is I don't care if you call me the janitor. I don't care what the office looks like. Do I have an ability to do what I'm good at and I'm passionate about? And then I kind of put the ego aside and you just learn and you evolve. And what you'll find through that is if you take that entrepreneurial mentality, which ultimately I define as ownership, as ownership over yourself, your actions, your consequences, you are going to be able to find those mentors that will gravitate towards that in your business, out of your business. And that's the key, right? Because you're going to start to create a network of good people,
right,
of resources. And then if you learn to keep your ears open,
right,
opportunities happen.
They do.
Did you ever see yourself sitting in this chair when you were, call it 20 years old, coming through school, trying to figure out the next steps?
Nope. I wouldn't even have guessed. I wouldn't have guessed I was geologically in, this area. I wouldn't have guessed I would be in this industry. Wouldn't guess I would, ever be part of like social media. At that time, I was the opposite, right? Mm-hmm. I was like, I don't want any of that, so it's crazy. It's really crazy. But
I was growing up thinking I was going to be a fighter pilot, and I'm still hoping deep down that might come true.
Well, maybe someday, right?
Right.
There's F-35 or there's L-39s, excuse me, that are civilian fighter pilots.
That's
fighter
right.
jets, and they're pretty awesome. But I think one of the last things to talk about, and you've said it a few times, but just to reiterate, is surround yourself with individuals that you want to be like, right? Like, if you are the smartest person in the room, you should probably leave that room.
You're in the wrong room.
You're in the wrong room. And I want to just say, though, because we've talked about almost kind of a negative of Instagram, pushing the entrepreneur, it also can do so much good if you use it in the correct way. And so when I say surround yourself not only by the individual, surround yourself with what you want to absorb. Like a famous thing is like, people have like, I stopped listening to music, I listen to podcasts. Okay. They're absorbing now information, instead of looking at cars and planes and, fishing or whatever, boats and stuff on Instagram. Follow the wealthy, pages or the mindset pages or whatever, right? And so be disciplined on what you're absorbing, because if you're absorbing crap, you will produce crap, right? If you absorb good, healthy, information, obviously you're going to be delivering that out, right? So I want people to understand, because we've hinted at it, being surrounded, get in a group of, like-minded individuals, men, women, different things, whatever it might be. It could be just a friend group, different things like that. But also to be very intentional on what you're consuming from an online standpoint or anything like that.
So important. Earl Nightingale has another great quote that he says, "The mind is like a fertile garden. And whatever you plant and water, it will grow. And it does not care what you plant and what you water." So to your point, right, I think that was something as I kind of went through, like you, right, didn't originally like social media, became a necessary evil, has some great benefits. What I found was I have to be intentional about how I use this and what I consume.
Right.
And if you go through my feed right now, my followers, my friends make fun of me because I'm constantly sharing, right, mindset pages, business advice, because that's what I want to consume. I don't want to consume the garbage.
Right.
And I think that you need to think about that in both the lens of social media and the online world we all live in now,
right,
as well as your real circle, right? You and I have connected on this of, find people that, to your point, right, it's partially, are you the smartest person in the room? It's also, are you in a room of good people? Because inevitably you will become the sum of the 5 or 6 people you hang out with the most.
Yep.
And those habits, those qualities rub off. So to your point, I think being intentional about what you let into your mind, what you think about, the relationships you foster, have a huge impact on you and your businesses.
Amen to that. So if you guys have enjoyed this podcast, we hope you took something powerful away from it. Age is obviously just a number. Look at Dan here. He's built a huge, kind of business, multiple business. But what's cool is he's built himself, and that's kind of the underlying thing here is you have to invest in yourself. You pour into yourself, and obviously you'll grow, and everything around you will grow. So, Dan, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and sharing a lot of wisdom that you've learned over the years. And I hope someone, obviously can listen to it and take something and better themselves, their life, their family, their business, what have it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure, and I think, like I said earlier, credits to you for providing the right form of content to this community. So if you are listening and you are following, if this is your first one, as you look through those different kind of sources on your feed, right, find people like this that are ethical, they're intelligent, they're good business people, but they're good humans. Mm-hmm. So it's been an honor to be here with you, and look forward to doing it again sometime.
Awesome. We'll put information if you'd like to reach out to Dan with any questions or concerns or anything like that. Thanks again, and we'll see you guys on the next podcast.